Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Anita ji. Where is Hema ji?
Hema will not be joining today, Pooja, because she has no internet connections and there was a lot of storm, I believe, there. And as soon as she gets the internet connection, she will join, and she's asked us to carry on. So Sunita is displaying. So is Sunita here?
Yes, Jai Gurudev, ma.
Very good. So Sunita, you go as you go every time.
Yes.
Get along, and I will ask for the mala, and then the Vedic Pundits will do that, and the reading. Puja will start chapter 4 with the vision, and I'll do the course overview, and we will wait by the time for Hemaji to join. And if she cannot join, she's asked me to take the main points, and we will continue.
Yes.
Thank you, Sunita. Thank
Jai
you,
Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Yes, Sunita, you can join us, the Vedic Pandit, to do the mala.
Jai Gurudev, Manish ji.
जय गुरुदेव दीदी।
Manish ji, you can start with mala.
जी दीदी। ओम सहनाववतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनामधेतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांतिः। ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। अथ चतुर्थो अध्यायः। श्री भगवानुवाच ओम इमं विवस्वते योगं प्रोक्ते वाहनमव्ययम् विवस्वान्मनवे प्राह मनुरिक्ष्वाकवे ब्रवीत् एवं परंपरा प्राप्तिम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप। ओम जय गुरुदेव। जय गुरुदेव।
Jai Gurudev. So we will start with chapter 1. Sorry, chapter 4. Reading of the vision by Puja. Puja ma'am.
Yes.
Chapter 4, vision.
Yeah.
Puja.
Jai Gurudev. A vision of teaching in chapter 4. Verse 1 to 5. This path of action for gaining success in the world and freedom in divine consciousness has a long tradition. In its content, it is eternal, even if in time its purity is lost and it is forgotten by man. Each time it is restored in the world by a wave of revival that comes from God. Verse 9 and 10. Knowledge of the divine as separate from activity, and knowledge of the Lord's birth and actions as divine. Raise man consciousness to that purity which places him on the divine level. Verses 11 and 12. Divine reaction to man depends upon man's action towards the divine. Success is born of action in the world of man. Verses 13 to 15. Having known the divine as creator and yet as unattached to activity, the seekers of liberation follow this example and engage in action. Verse 16 to 22. The course of action being unfathomable. Performance of proper action is only possible with knowledge of divine nature. This knowledge is fully gained in divine consciousness, in which inner freedom and outer activity are simultaneously maintained. Verses 23 to 33. Gaining divine consciousness, man raises to oneness of life, and in this state, all activities in the light of God. All actions culminate in the knowledge of God. Verses 34 to 38. Established in this knowledge, a man sees all being in himself and find himself in God. This supreme state of purity in God consciousness puts an end to ignorance and all bondage of action. Verses 39 to 42. The light of this knowledge is kindled in one who is full of faith, intent of purpose, and has his senses subdued. It brings abiding peace without delay. Gain the state of non-attachment and freedom from doubts, be established in the self, and action will not bind. Thank you.
Now we begin with chapter 4, and this is the overview of the chapter. So we have done 1 to 3, and it gives you a short summary of what we have already done. This chapter springs from the same breath of Shri Krishna Bhagavan as chapter 3. Verse 48 of chapter 2 contains the seed thoughts which give rise to both chapters. Established in yoga, perform action, to chapter 3, and having abandoned attachment and having become balanced in success and failure, to chapter 4. These two chapters together are therefore sufficient to bring enlightenment to a seeker. They give him, insofar as words can, the desired experience and full understanding of it. The second chapter presented the doctrine of liberation. It analyzed life in its relative and absolute aspects and promised liberation through knowledge of these. Knowledge in its entirety comprises both understanding and experience. Therefore, in order to gain fulfillment, a man must necessarily acquire both understanding and experience of the relative and the absolute, irrespective of whether his path is that of a householder or a recluse. It follows that the wisdom of the Sankhya, which brings liberation through understanding of the relative and the absolute, and the practice of yoga, which brings liberation by providing direct experience of these two spheres of existence, are both paths to enlightenment. All this teaching is contained in the second chapter. The third chapter presented the doctrine of action, designed to make permanent the experience of absolute first, mentioned in the 45th verse of the second chapter. When this experience of the absolute has become permanent, self-awareness is naturally maintained through all the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states of consciousness. One experiences oneself as separate from activity, as one lives this life of non-involvement, of natural non-attachment. One's intellect begins to inquire, is this the truth of life? Has this sense of separateness or non-attachment anything to do with real life? Or is it an escape from life? Is the reality of life a duality? The duality of being and activity? Such doubts are removed by the knowledge given in the 4th chapter. This chapter, dedicated to the knowledge of renunciation, analyzes the nature of action and the nature of actor on both the individual and cosmic levels, on the level of man and on the level of God, and then proclaims the result of this systematic and rational analysis. Action and actor are independent of one another. There exists a natural state of separation between them at every level. This state of non-attachment or renunciation provides, on the one hand, a solid foundation of eternal wisdom for the actor, and on the other, the maximum possible success in action with most glorious fruits. It is this state of renunciation that provides the eternal playground for the divine and for man. Ignorance of this natural basis of life is the cause of bondage and all suffering. Knowledge of it results in eternal freedom. To unfold this knowledge is the purpose of the 4th chapter. The most fascinating aspect of this chapter is in bringing out knowledge of the renunciation of action. It explains the whole field of action, showing how stream of life advances towards the higher spheres of existence, verse 10, and towards higher forces in nature, verse 12, until it merges with the ocean of eternal freedom in God consciousness, verse 9. This chapter of knowledge is of utmost importance to a seeker, for it explains the most valuable experience on the path to enlightenment, the experience of the separateness of the self and activity. And his practice advances, every seeker must necessarily reach the experience, and if he is to proceed smoothly on this path, unhindered by doubts, he must possess this knowledge. In order to bring out the complete knowledge of separation or the state of renunciation that exists between self and activity, this chapter explains the two spheres of life, relative and absolute. In doing so, it proclaims the philosophy of two-fullness found in the Upanishads. This is full, that is full, Purnamadha, Purnamadham. That transcendental, unmanifested, absolute, eternal being is full, and this manifested, relative, ever-changing world of phenomenal existence is also full. The absolute is eternal in its never-changing nature, and the relative is eternal in its ever-changing nature. So this living reality of two fullnesses in cosmic consciousness finds its consummation in the grand unity of God consciousness. In expounding this unlimited philosophy of the two fullnesses, this chapter presents the core of the wisdom contained in the scripture of yoga. And for this reason, Shri Krishna Bhawan begins by giving Arjuna an account of the tradition of yoga. Jai Gurudev. A little summary I can give you about this chapter. So in this overview, we have seen how first, second, third chapter, how it has now come to the 4th aspect of the most beautiful seeking the knowledge in the chapter 4th of the Bhagavad Gita, where we are going to live two fullnesses. That is, fullness of the absolute and the fullness of the relative. Now, what is the fullness of the absolute? That is, we know Purnamadha, Purnamadham. We know that eternal fullness is there in us. And when that eternal fullness is carried out in the relative world that we live also becomes full. And that way, we know it is the biggest than the biggest, the smaller than the smallest. Everything is full, whether it is the relative world or the absolute world. So the two full worlds We are now going to enter in chapter 4. और ये कैसे होते हैं two full worlds? That we live through Maharishi transcendental meditation. When we are transcending, we reach to ourself minus the activity, and then we are in that absolute being established, and that again and again transcending and again transcending and living that absolute in the relative life, we are twice blessed. We are twice full. There are two fullnesses of a life which we have gained now as a seeker. And this is chapter 4, what is going to reach us and tell us how we reach in the two fullnesses of life. Thank you, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Thank you, Anita ji. Manish ji.
जी दीदी.
चैप्टर 4 का पहला श्लोक पढ़िएगा.
जी दीदी. ओम श्री भगवान उवाच इमं विवस्वते योगं रोक्तवाहनमव्ययं विवस्वान्मनवे प्राह मनुरुक्ष्वा कवे ब्रवीत. ओम.
Jai Gurudev. The blessed Lord said, Shri Krishna Bhagavan said, I proclaimed this imperishable yoga to Vishwavat. Vishwavat declared it to Manu, and Manu told it to Ikshwaku. This imperishable yoga, the preceding chapters have been devoted to yoga, Sankhya yoga and Karma yoga. By saying this yoga, Shri Krishna Bhagavan speaks of them both as one. This is to bring home to Arjuna that although they have been declared to be different, they have the same basis and yield the same results. The basis is be without the three gunas, which brings fulfillment both to the wisdom of Sankhya and to the practice of Karma yoga. Thus, the word yoga in this verse stands for both Sankhya and Karma yoga. The yoga expounded by Shri Krishna Bhagavan is imperishable because it brings to light the wisdom of the absolute and the wisdom of the relative. The relative and the absolute, both these are eternal, and so is yoga, which expounds the truth of both, the truth of life in its fullness. It is eternal because it serves the cosmic purpose and is natural to the mind of man. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says that he taught this eternal yoga to Vishwavat in the beginning of creation in order to infuse strength into the Kshatriyas and to enable them to maintain law and order and preserve the path of righteousness for the well-being of society. Vishwasvat revealed it to the son Manu, the lawgiver to the world, and Manu gave it to his son Ikshwaku, who ruled at Ayodhya as the first king of the solar dynasty. The Bhagavad Gita is the highest expression of divine intelligence understandable by man. Dealing with the unseen aspects of life, it also touches on the past and present of the world of our daily life. Furthermore, the Bhagavad Gita, while expounding universal truth, is itself a historical record and relates incidents that took place 5,000 years ago. In order to understand the historical significance of the Bhagavad Gita, one must be familiar with the Indian conception of history and time. The study of history has a definite society and a place in the life of the individual. Its aim is to educate the mind of the present with information from the past in order to ensure a better present and a better future. In this way, each generation takes advantage of the achievements of the past and advances towards greater wisdom in life. But it is not knowledge of the chronological order of events that educates students of history. It is the value of events that is important, and this is the aspect of history on which Indian historians have concentrated. They have put on record for all generations to read only such instances in the great span of time as can help to integrate men's lives. Their purpose is to inspire men both as individuals and as members of society.
Yes, Sunita, we will pause here. We will pause here, Sunita, because we will discuss the 2-3 main points and then we will go ahead. Hema will read it, right?
Yes, Anita.
Okay. So in this, it is so beautifully explained. The first main point is that the knowledge of yoga, which now Shri Krishna Bhagwan is giving it to Arjun, is the knowledge that Karma Yoga and Sankhya Yoga is one and the same thing. The second point is this knowledge is absolute, and what is this knowledge? Why again and again you will see Shri Krishna Bhagwan will be talking of the knowledge of the yoga, the knowledge of the science. And what is this knowledge of this yoga? That is the knowledge of the eternal being in connection to the unity consciousness, to God consciousness. And here Krishna Bhagwan says that this knowledge is eternal knowledge. This is the science of yoga. And this knowledge I have passed on to the sun god Vivasvan, who passed it on to Manu, and who later on passed it to Ikshvaku. To say all this, how the knowledge is passed on, you will read further, is called a descending order. The knowledge that we have is achieved in two ways. One is called descending order, the one is called ascending order. Just now in the main point, we have only read the descending order. And what does that mean? It means the knowledge which comes down from the guru to the disciple, and imparting this valuable knowledge is only good if the recipient of the knowledge is good. We may teach Bhagavad Gita, we may give knowledge, but if the disciple is not ready to appreciate its value or appreciate its faith, then this knowledge is of no use. The knowledge will only be of some use if there is faith in this knowledge. And Shri Krishna Bhagwan says the credibility of this knowledge, this is the spiritual wisdom. He tells Arjun, I am not giving you this knowledge because you are at the battlefield. I am not trying to motivate you, but this is the eternal science of yoga, which was passed on, as you have mentioned, to Vivasvan, then to Manu, and then later on to Ikshvaku, and then we all are beneficiary, and this knowledge has come down slowly in a descending order in perfect perfection. Jai Gurudev, if you have got my point clearly, or you can ask me. Sunita, Pooja, everybody, we are only talking of the knowledge which comes from descending in a descending order from Guru to Shishya. which is the eternal knowledge of wisdom.
Yes, ma'am.
And got it clearly? And now Hima will read the rest, and then I'll give you the main points for the rest. Thank you. Jai Gurudev. Hima, start.
Thank you, Anitaji. Jai Gurudev. The sage of enlightened vision, Veda Vyasa, who is regarded as the greatest historian of the Aryan culture of India, had before him a vast span of time to take into account. As a conscientious and fully integrated man, he could not write the history of this immeasurable period as a sequence of days and years. He could only select particular happenings and record them in such a way as to inspire and guide people of all times on the path of evolution and educate them in the integration of their life. This is why no chronological order is to be found in Indian histories. Vyasa thought it absurd to pin every event down chronologically just for the sake of establishing each link on the long road of time. Moreover, it is not physically possible to write the history of millions of years in chronological sequence. In the case of small countries with a few thousand years of civilization, it is quite practicable for historians with a vision of that small area and that small span of time to maintain chronological order. But Vyasa had a clear vision of the whole span of time beginning from the day of creation. Such a mind would not and could not assign any value to chronology. The Indian conception of time, as set out below, will clearly show the situation that confronted Vyasa and other writers of Indian history. Time is a conception to measure eternity. Indian historians base their conception of time on eternal being. For them, eternity is the basic field of time. To arrive at some conception of the eternal, the best measure will be the lifespan of something that has the greatest longevity in the relative field of creation. This, according to the enlightened vision of Vyasa, is the Divine Mother, the Universal Mother, who is ultimately responsible for all that is, was, and will be in the entire cosmos. The eternity of the eternal life of absolute being is conceived in terms of innumerable lives of the Divine Mother, a single one of whose lives encompasses 1,000 lifespans of Lord Shiva. One life of Lord Shiva covers the time of 1,000 lifespans of Lord Vishnu. One life of Lord Vishnu equals the duration of 1,000 lifespans of Brahma, the creator. A single lifespan of Brahma is conceived in terms of 100 years of Brahma. Each year of Brahma comprises 12 months of Brahma, and each month comprises 30 days of Brahma. One day of Brahma is called a kalpa. One kalpa is equal to the time of 14 manus. The time of one manu is called a manvantara. One manvantara equals 71 chaturyugis. One chaturyugi comprises the total span of 4 yugas, that is Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. The span of the yugas is conceived in the terms of duration of Satya Yuga. Thus, the span of Treta Yuga is equal to 3/4 of that of Satya Yuga. The span of Dwapara Yuga is half that of Satya Yuga, and the span of Kali Yuga 1/4 that of Satya Yuga. The span of Kali Yuga equals 432,000 years of man's life. Now, consider the time of creation for how many billion trillion years the world has been. Even if the account of 1 year were to occupy a page or even a single line, how could anyone possibly read such a history and apply its lessons to his life? This is why chronological order was not maintained by Indian historians. Apart from being impracticable, it was considered to be unnecessary, useless, and damaging to the very purpose of history. All this should be borne in mind by those modern historians who tend to reject as non-history any series of events for which they fail to find a proper chronological order. It is deplorable that such precious accounts of life on the highest human level as are to be found in the historical material of ancient India should have been regarded as myth. They should, on the contrary, be recognized as the most useful history of the highest civilization that has ever existed on earth. The Bhagavad Gita forms the central core of the most authentic record of Indian history, the Mahabharata. This cannot be dismissed as mythology just because the narrow vision of modern historians tried to rigid chronology fails to understand it as a historical record and puts it in the compartment of imaginative literature. It is regrettable that some modern commentators on the Bhagavad Gita have followed in the footsteps of modern historians and refused to admit its historic authenticity. It is to be hoped that the light will dawn and truth will be recognized as truth. When Shri Krishna Bhagavan recalls for Arjuna that the great wisdom of Bhagavad Gita was given to Vivasvat in the beginning of this kalpa, he does not enumerate in detail all the custodians of this supreme knowledge. To satisfy Arjuna about the original source of teaching, it is sufficient to give him the idea of this eternal wisdom being handed on from generation to generation. Jai Gurudev.
Thank you, Hema. Now, the portion that Hemaji has just read, the whole portion speaks about the ascending order. But to begin with, we have to first give you the major point here. And the main point here is that the enlightened people like Ved Vyasa, who have such a broad vision that he knows everything from creation to this day, he could not write everything in one go that this happened because it is so much of Sankhya, so much of intellect, so much of knowledge. So now what happens? This knowledge from Ved Vyasa, because it could not have been written in such a great wisdom, not such a great vision, because the civilizations have gone, and there was this span of time where this chronological order was being maintained. But what was happening by maintaining the chronological order? As the civilizations were changed, the people, the so-called disciples, they changed the value of what was original according to their own materialistic blemishes. The knowledge which was pure, which was coming in the descending order, now started to become ascending order because we all started to interpret knowledge the way it suited us. Now, Ved Vyas could not have given the knowledge, as you have read in this chapter, that one single span of Brahma was conceived in terms of 100 years of Brahma. Then each year of Brahma comprises of 12 months of Brahma. Then each month comprises of 30 days of Brahma. Then one day is called a kalpa. So if we study this type of time and knowledge, it is not feasible and possible to maintain the span of Kali Yuga, which equals to 432 years of man's life. So, since we means Vedvyasa and all are enlightened people, then what was the second way? Now, how can we pass on to this knowledge? I have already told you in the first main point that knowledge came down in the descending order from guru to disciple. Now, as the knowledge was coming from guru to disciple, it became blemished because the civilization changed the knowledge according to their own aspects and what suited them. They did not adhere to the Kali Yuga, which equals to 432,000 years of life. Now, what is the next thing? The historians could not maintain that. The Indian historians, any historians would not be able to maintain. Like we all understand that Vedas are also passed from generation to generation. So now what happens in this way? The ascending order starts. And now, what is the ascending order? The ascending way is you acquire the knowledge through your own effort. For example, you're studying physics or chemistry or any subject. One way is that you learn that knowledge, you get that knowledge from your teacher, who is the perfect teacher. And everything comes down to you, trickles down to you. The other way is ascending order. You say, no, I want to gain knowledge myself with my intellect. I will do it myself. And in doing that, you will need lot of labor. You will need lot of time. You will reach a point when you will not know whether that knowledge that you have gained yourself is right or wrong, because there's nobody to tell you. You're gaining that self knowledge, and this is not the eternal knowledge you're gaining. This is the materialistic knowledge that you're gaining. So in doing that, you are wasting so much of time, so much of labor, because the ascending process does not come to the validity of conclusion. But descending gives you the instant secret, because you see, your teacher is so highly perfect and educated, he will at once tell you. That is why we have teachers, that is why we have gurus. You just tell the teacher, sir, I did not understand this, ma'am, I did not understand this, and he gives you an answer. Whereas if we do it ourselves, then we have to study and study and study and find out the answer, and then whom will we get it checked? So the descending process is an easy process, and it is only easy if it is by a perfect enlightened teacher. Another point which is here very important is you may have lots of books in the market which tells you this is right, and then after a few years another book comes and it says, no, this is not right, this is right, because all these things are created by yourself. But remember, one thing which is not created by your own self, that is the energy of God, which is within you. So the science of yoga, that is uniting of God, the individual soul, together as eternal being, which we will again and again come in this chapter called the science of yoga. This is the science that we are talking about in chapter 4. And Bhagavad Gita is that science which is permanent wisdom, which is relevant in our daily lives, which is passed on in a descending process from guru to disciple. Today we are reading Bhagavad Gita. So I have not made Bhagavad Gita. Another person has not Bhagavad Gita. It is the eternal wisdom that is being passed from generation to generation. So that is why Shri Krishna Bhagavan says in the end to Arjuna that the original source of this teaching, it is sufficient to give you an idea that this is the eternal wisdom which is handed on from generation to generation. It is not the corrupted wisdom. It is not the wisdom which suits you and me. It is eternal. So what we understand in this verse is, the first verse is, the recap is that there are two types of orders that we follow when we do Bhagavad Gita. One is the ascending order, one is the descending order. And descending order is the one which comes from the Guru to the Shishya. The ascending order is where we put in our own effort. Both are the ways of gaining Sankhya, gain of knowledge, but descending order is more convenient. So we listen to our teachers, we follow our gurus, we follow the Vedas, and we follow Bhagavad Gita. Thank you, Jai Gurudev. In case you want to ask something, otherwise I'll do the scientific research. I don't, Hema, am I able to explain to you what I really want you to get knowledge?
Yes, Sanitaji.
Definitely,
It's
Hema.
very, very clear and very understandable.
It was clear.
Okay. So yes, now we come on to the scientific research. If Sunita can display, because there's a lovely chart of this. Yes, the integration of the brain functioning. Now, what happens in this picture, if you see the verse 1, this picture here, which tells you so beautifully in the circular motion, the concept of learning, the moral reasoning, the academic performance, transcendental consciousness, neurological efficiency, and creativity. Now, all these things take place because of the integration of the brain functioning. Now, what does the first verse of chapter 4 teach us? It tells us there is an increased integration of the brain functioning. Why it is so? It is so that now we have started to understand that how are we going to go about the comprehension of the eternal wisdom, whether we are going to accept the descending order or whether we are going to make our own effort in an ascending order. So here also the scientific research through Maharishi Transcendental Meditation says integration of the brain takes place when you are transcending. So everything is told to you in a descending order. You are not putting. That's why transcendental meditation is a selfless, effortless. It's absolutely effortless because everything is within you. That energy to transcend is also within you. So when everything is within you and you are transcending, so it is proved here scientifically that there is a greater integration of the brain functioning. And when there will be integration of the brain functioning, and so many things are being connected together. So that means we are into a descending order. We agree that this scientific research helps us in the transcendence, or transcendence has proved scientifically that there is a greater brain integration and better brain functioning. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Manish ji. Anita ma'am, shall we continue with the next verse?
Yeah, if somebody wants to ask in my capacity, whatever, I will be able to come back, and they are most welcome.
Any questions?
Otherwise, we can continue.
Someone has raised a hand, BG.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Audio is not proper, sir.
Very interesting
So can you check the
to
audio,
hear
sir?
about the ascending order and the descending order.
Is it Bhuvan speaking?
Jai Gurudev, am I audible now?
Yeah,
Ji, that's right.
right, Bhuvan, bolo.
Jai Gurudev, Anita ji. Very interesting to hear about the ascending order and descending order. I'm really hearing this for the first time. So very expansive to hear this. Thank you for that explanation. As a teacher, also as a principal, you've been in the field of education for many, many years. We are always trying to spark the excitement and curiosity of students to find knowledge. And this is also the Western construct of education, where the student must be encouraged to continue with their own curiosity. I'm tending to believe or leaning towards the idea that there has to be a fine balance between finding the right guru, that itself is a challenge, to receive knowledge, and how much, to what extent should one continue to do one's own search. So would you like to elaborate a little bit on this, please? Thank you.
Bhuvan, yes. First of all, we have to understand that knowledge is structured in consciousness, right? So this principle is the core principle of our spirituality in Maharishi, that knowledge is structured in consciousness. Now, we do not give individual hand to the children as a principle, I'm saying, because nobody writes on their own. આજકાલ with the technology, everybody goes to Google and gets what they want. How do you think their horizon is broadened? Because they have not made that effort. Google has made that effort. But the knowledge is there eternally within you. Now, what happens for this? The second point, Bhuvan, is that we are in need of excellent, perfect teachers who can impart the knowledge in such a way that there is no quest for knowledge left. I would say here that the perfection in teacher, and already in this verse 1, they say that only those enlightened souls like Ved Vyasas could pass on the knowledge because they were perfect. So I do appreciate that children must have the curiosity and work, but it is not in their self. It is in Google. It is in their parents. It is not in themselves. Sorry to say, I have experienced that, Bhuvan.
Very well, thank you. You just mentioned that on receiving the perfect knowledge, one feels not a lack to seek any further. So in a sense, you're saying one feels fulfilled with having received that knowledge. Do I take that as an indication that if I've heard something or if I receive, it's a certain intuition at a level, at a very silent level inside, you feel more fulfilled having heard the right answer, which could be the truth for that question in that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Bhuvan, because here, when you talk about schools, then we talk about so many levels. Then because the children have not transcended, they don't know, they are, the purity of Maharishi always spoke on education, and he said that our education is objective education. When we talk of education in Maharishi, we talk about subjective and objective. We've already talked about the knower, knowing, and the known. So we talk about the subjective education also, and then the syllabi, the objective education also.
Thank you. I must make one small comment on what I've understood from you is even though my capacity at the current moment may be limited not to be able to understand or grasp all of what I hear in this group, but the fact that I feel fulfilled at the end of what I hear is in itself a great enrichment and a great indication that it is knowledge being imbibed at a certain level, may not be at my intellectual level as of now. Thank you
No,
very much.
Bhuvan. No, you've been very kind, Bhuvan. You are kind and very humble. It's not like that. We're just one of those little here and there. We're trying to help each other. Thank you so much, Bhuvan, for your whatever you said about the knowledge. That's great. Thank you. Anybody else, or we can proceed to the verse 2?
Yes, Anita ji, we will move on to the verse 2. Manish ji,
जी दीदी
दूसरा श्लोक पढ़िए.
जी दीदी ओम एवं परंपरा प्राप्तम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप. ओम जय गुरुदेव.
Thus, having received it one from another, the royal sages knew it. With a long lapse of time, or scorcher of enemies, this yoga has been lost to the world. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says that this technique of integration of life was handed on to the philosopher king, men who led active life and had great responsibilities in the world. In those days, the rulers were held responsible for every aspect of the development of their people, physical, mental, and spiritual. They gave this wisdom of yoga to people in general. In the modern democratic world, each man has to look after his own affairs. Thus, it is in keeping with our times that each man should feel responsible for his own development. As spiritual development is the basis of all other forms of development, it is necessary that this great science and art of successful living should now be handed on to every man everywhere in the world. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says, having received it one from another, by this he brings an unquestionable authenticity to this system of yoga. It has been since the beginning of history. Again, he says, the royal sages knew it, showing it to be precious doctrine, followed by those in positions of great responsibility. Hema, please continue.
Jaikuti. The reason for its loss, Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, is the long lapse of time. But in the first verse, he has spoken of this yoga as imperishable. This implies that while its principle is imperishable, its practice needs periodic revival according to the changed conditions of living from age to age, because it awakens man's consciousness to extreme purity. The system of yoga is equally suitable for people in every age. Sometimes, however, it is not followed in its pure form. Then the desired results are not achieved, and this eventually leads to indifference towards its practice. Thus, this great principle of life becomes lost from time to time. But it cannot be lost forever because, as the truth of existence, it must be brought to light again and again. Nature helps to restore it. From time to time, great teachers come with the proper inspiration to reveal the path once more. They renew the tradition which maintains the teaching. The renewed tradition remains dominant so long as it continues to inspire the people. But when it fails to respond to the need of the age new teachers arise. This cycle is repeated again and again. Some who came to revive the tradition honor the ancient line of teachers, others, failing to relate the traditional solutions to their present need, break away from the established tradition. Their teachings form new branches of the old trunk. The custodians of ancient tradition of Vedic wisdom act as the guardians of main trunk from which different branches have sprung from time to time in the form of different religions, faiths, philosophies, and cultures in different parts of the world. Today, the most cherished tradition of Vedic wisdom is the Shankaracharya tradition, which in its present shape began about 2500 years ago with the teaching of the first Shankaracharya. He revived the forgotten truth. By his faithful interpretation of the essence of Vedic literature, he re-established the principle of the unity of all pervading being in the midst of the diversity of life. He established the unified philosophy of the two-fullness as the essential teaching of the Vedanta. His commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita are extolled for their depth of wisdom and magnificent exposition of the reality of life. Strange how the truth of a teaching becomes distorted with the passage of time. The truth of Shankara's teaching has been so misrepresented by his interpreters that modern writing about his thought retains little of his spirit. The sannyasi or recluse orders of Shankara's tradition have been interpreting Shankara Vedanta as being completely closed to the householders who form the main section of society and open only to themselves. This has resulted in spiritual decadence and in the moral downfall of Indian society. Such decay is nothing new. It happens, says Shri Krishna Bhagavan, with the long lapse of time, the truth is overshadowed and distorted interpretations take its place. But when these depart so far from the truth that the principle itself is in danger of extinction, then a revival comes to save it. The holy tradition of great masters, which is responsible for reviving the teaching after every lapse, has captured the minds and hearts of lovers of truth in every age. It is not merely held in high regard, but has come to be actually worshipped by seekers of truth and knowers of reality. A verse recording the names of the greatest and most highly revered masters has not only inspired seekers, but has been a joy even to the fulfilled hearts of realized souls passing through the long corridor of time. Scorcher of enemies, by using this expression, Sri Krishna Bhagavan indicates to Arjuna that this yoga has been lost through falling into the hands of the weak, and that now, by finding its way into the strong hands of Arjuna, it will prove its worth and help the world to restore and maintain the path of righteousness. Sri Krishna Bhagavan's expression also indicates to Arjuna that he will not prove unworthy of this great blessing. In the following verse, he gives further reasons for teaching this wisdom to Arjuna. Jai Gurudev.
So in this verse, we have seen how the things progress, because whatever has been the truth of the eternal wisdom has somewhere been distorted. And why it has been distorted is because whoever rules at that particular time He has to take care of his own subjects mentally, physically, spiritually. He has to see to the development of the people. And in doing so, some way or the other, he might not stick on to the eternal wisdom. He might change things according to his own self to please his own people. Now, what happens? The pure knowledge, when it gets distorted, then it goes on, and we forget that the pure knowledge is like a trunk of a tree, Maharishi says. The branches can spread in different forms of religion. It can be Christianity, it can be Islam, it can be any religion. But the fundamental is the same. And that fundamental of the different branches of the same trunk of tree is compared to the different religions that came out from the same trunk. And what was the same trunk? It was our eternal wisdom, our Vedic knowledge, our Vedic culture, our Vedic tradition, and our Vedic knowledge. So Shri Krishna Bhagavan says that the custodians of these ancient traditions of the Vedic wisdom, they are like the guardians of the trunk. The knowledge may have been distorted, but it comes back to one. Have we not seen even now every religion? The path to attain may be different, but the purpose of the religion is the same. Everything is the same. The goal is the same. So that means the truth of the eternal wisdom is just the same for every branch, because it is the same sap in the trunk which goes to the different branches. But the main is the same. So we come back to the teaching of Shankara and we see, even if there has been a spiritual decadence, that means there may have been a spiritual decline, but the power of the eternal wisdom is so powerful that with time we come back. It is something like, you hit something and it falls down and then it again comes back. The children play with that game, you hit it and it comes back. For time being, it may fall down. But the holy tradition of the great masters is so very powerful, is so very responsible, that it captures the mind and the heart of the lovers of truth in every age. So, even the scorcher of enemies, by using this expression, Lord Krishna Bhagavan tells Arjuna that this yoga has been lost through falling into the hand of the weak, but now it will go to the hand of the strong people, because this eternal truth works for righteousness, the path of righteousness. And this is how Shri Krishna Bhagavan is telling Arjuna to come on to the path of righteousness. Otherwise, you are not worthy of your profession, of your Kshatriyahood. So, and every time when there is some spiritual decadence, then what happens? Somebody or the other comes and takes birth in this world to regain, to give back that knowledge to the world. And I am remembered how in our family of Maharishi, how Maharishi came and he moved into a spiritual regeneration movement. The spiritual decadence has come down, and Maharishi came and he started a movement called the spiritual regeneration movement. And once again, the things which go down, they come up. And we have lots of rishis and munis, and we have Jagat Guru Shankaracharya, who have brought back the power, the energy, and the insight into the eternal wisdom of our Vedas back. So the spiritual decadence does not take place when the knowledge is in the right hands. Thank you, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Anitaji. Shall we move on to the scientific research, or we will wait for anyone to ask a question?
I can do scientific research and then they can ask a question, or if they've understood, it's okay. So in the verse 2nd, in the scientific research, it says that through Maharishi transcendental meditation, there is increased self-development, because now you are understanding the power of field independence. You have a broader comprehension and you have the greater increased ability to focus attention on what you are doing. So here in this chapter, we are understanding through this verse that there is increased integration again of the brain functioning, because we are more into self-development. We are understanding that everything sprouts from here and comes back there. So this is the great understanding, and that is through Maharishi Transcendental Meditation, when there is the increased self-development. Thank you, Jai Gurudev. Abhi, we have some time, Sunita. If you want to continue or ask something, you're most welcome.
Anyone has any question? Okay, there are no questions. So shall we continue with the 10 minutes of meditation and then chanting of the verses of chapter 4, ma'am?
Any birthdays also, Sunita, please ask.
Okay, any birthdays in the group? Can we have their names, or anyone?
There's somebody in the chat box wanting to know something, Sunita? Okay.
No, it's from just.
There's no charge of mobile.
Yeah,
That's all right. But in the nutshell, there are the few points in the two verses, because these two verses will become the base for our further this thing. I'm sure next week, when you have the recap, it will be more clear and comprehensive to you. And I was just told to get into it because Hema does not have internet connections at the moment.
It was clear, ma'am. It was very clear. We could understand.
So I thought, I asked her not to. She was really concerned about it. I said not to worry, Sunita. All of us there, Pooja is there, everybody is there. So
Definitely.
thank you so much for your cooperation, and then we can do the meditation and continue. And Sunita, please see that you do the next two shlokas, third and fourth, right?
Yes.
Thank
Shall we
you.
do now, ma'am? Shall I ask Manish to do now?
No, first we'll do the meditation and then we'll do that, and then Shanti Path, and then we'll close.
Yes.
Thank you, Vipul. Thank
Yes.
you.
Jai Gurudev, Manish ji. We will have the verse last two after the meditation, so please be up rahiyega. We will continue with the meditation for 10 minutes. Everyone, close your eyes. जय गुरुदेव। जय गुरुदेव। मनीष जी,
जी दीदी।
एंड माला पढ़िएगा, तीसरे से शुरू करके 2 श्लोक पढ़िए, फिर उसके बाद चतुर्दोध्याय का पूरा श्लोक पढ़िए।
जी दीदी। ओम स एवायं मया तेद्य योगः प्रोक्तः पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं ह्येतमुत्तमम्। अर्जुन उवाच अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद्विजानीयाम् त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति। ॐ शान्ताकारं भुजगशयनं पद्मनाभं सुरेशं विश्वाधारं गगनसदृशं मेघवर्णं शुभांगं लक्ष्मीकान्तं कमलनयनं योगविद्यानगम्यं वन्दे विष्णुं भवभयहरं सर्वलोकैकनाथम्। ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः। अथ चतुर्थोऽध्यायः। श्रीभगवानुवाच इमं विवस्वते योगं प्रोक्तवाहनमव्ययम् विवस्वान्मनवे प्राह मनुरिक्ष्वा कवे ब्रवीत एवं परम्परा प्राप्तम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तपा स एवाय मया तेज्या योगं प्रोक्तः पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं ह्येतदुत्तमम्। ॐ अर्जुन उवाच अपरं भवतो जन्म परम जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद्विजानीयां त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति। बहो श्रीभगवानुवाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तवार्जुन तान्याहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेत्थ परन्तपा अजोऽपि संयव्यात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामिधिष्ठाय सम्भवायात्ममायया यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानम् अधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहं परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेत्ति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नेति मामेति सोऽर्जुन भीतरागभयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञान तपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मा प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वशः काङ्क्षतः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्ता इह देवता क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मज चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्य कर्तारमव्ययम् न मां कर्माणि लिम्पन्ति न मे कर्मफले स्पृहा इति मां योऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न स विद्यते एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वे पूर्वतरं कृतं किं कर्मेति कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात् कर्मणो ह्यपि बोधव्यं च कर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्मण्यकर्मः यः पश्येत् कर्मणा सा कर्म यः सा बुद्धिर्मान् मनुष्येषु सा युक्ता कृत्स्नकर्मकृत यस्य सर्वे समारम्भा कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणां तमाहुः पण्डितं बुधाः त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलं सङ्गा नित्यत्रश्च निरोषजाः त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलं शृङ्ग यच्च तृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्वपरिग्रह शारीरं केवलं कर्मं कुर्वान् नाप्नोति किल्बिषम् यदृच्छालाभसन्तुष्टो द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्परः यदृच्छालाभसन्तुष्टो द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्सरः समः सिद्धावसिद्धो च कृत्वापि न विद्यते गतसङ्गस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसा या यज्ञायाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रबलीयते ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्महविर्ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन कर्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपयुज्यते श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संज्ञासम्माग्नाग्निषु जुह्वते श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वते शब्दादीन् विषयानन्या इन्द्राग्निषु जुह्वते सर्वाणीन्द्रियाणि कर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयम योगाग्नो जुह्वते ज्ञानदीपते द्रव्ययज्ञास्तपो यज्ञा योग यज्ञास्तपे परे स्वाध्याय यज्ञान यज्ञाश्च यतया संसिता व्रताः अपाने जुह्वति प्राणं प्राणे पानं तथा परे प्राणापानगतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायाम परायणाः अपरे नियताहारा प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुह्वति सर्वेप्येति यज्ञविद्दो यज्ञक्षिप्तकल्मषाः सर्वेप्येते यज्ञविदो यज्ञक्षापितकल्मषाः यज्ञशिष्टामृतभुजो यान्ति ब्रह्म सनातनं नायं लोकोऽस्ति यज्ञस्य कुन्तो निन्यः कुरन्तपाः नायं लोकोऽस्ति यज्ञस्य कुतोऽन्यः कुरु सतम् एवं बहुविधारा यज्ञा वितता ब्रह्मणो मुखे कर्मजा विद्धितान् सर्वान् नैवं ज्ञात्वा विमुक्ष्यसे श्रेयान् द्रव्यमयाद्यज्ञान् ज्ञानयज्ञः परन्तपा सर्वं कर्माखिलं पार्थ ज्ञाने परिसमाप्यते तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेक्षन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः यज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोह मेवं यास्यसि पण्डवा तुमो यज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोहम् एवं यास्यसि पाण्डवा एना भूतानशेषेण द्रक्ष्यस्यान्तमन्यथो मयि अपचेदसि पापेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः पापकृत्तमः सर्वं ज्ञानप्लवेनैव रजनं सन्तरिष्यसि यथैथांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर्भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुनः अयाज्ञाग्नि सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रम् इहं विद्यते तत्स्वयं योगसंसिद्धः कालेनात्मनि विन्दते श्रद्धावान् लभते ज्ञानं ततः तत्परः संयतेन्द्रियः ज्ञानं लब्ध्वा परं शान्तिम् इचिरेणाधिगच्छति अग्न्यश्चासिद्धधानश्च संशयात्मा विनश्यति नायं लोकोऽस्ति न परो न सुखं संययात्मनः योगसन्न्यास्तकर्माणं ज्ञानसञ्छिन्न संशयम् आत्मवन्तं न कर्माणि निबध्नन्ति धनञ्जया तस्मात् ज्ञानं न सम्भूतं यतस्थं ज्ञानासिनात्मनः चित्वैनं संशयं योगम् आतिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत ओम तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्म विद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुन संवादे ज्ञान कर्म संन्यास योगो नाम चतुर्थो अध्यायः। श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु। हरिः ओम।
मनीष जी शांति पाठ भी कर दीजिएगा।
हरि ओम मायो शांतिरंतरिक्षगुं शांतिः पृथ्वी शांतिरापः शांतिरोषधयः शांतिः वनस्पतयः शांतिर्विश्वे देवाः शांति ब्रह्म शांतिः सर्वगुं शांतिः शांतिरेव शांतिः श्यामा शांतिरेधि यतो यतः समीहसे ततो नो अभयं कुरु सन्नः कुरु प्रजाभ्यो भयन्नः पाशवियः ओम शांति 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 हरि ओम। जय
Jai
गुरुदेव।
Gurudev. Everyone can come on to the video. Any birthdays today? Jai Gurudev, Anita ji. Jai Gurudev. So today we will wind up the session. Thank you very
Sunita,
much.
thank you so much. Thank you,
Anita ji,
Pooja.
thank you very much for the today's session.
Okay. And
Thank
Pooja,
you, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Pooja was so sweet. I told her to come and to read, and she came promptly. Thank you, Pooja.
जय गुरुदेव दीदी।
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Manishi, thank you very much. Dhanyavad.
धन्यवाद दीदी।
सुनीता आप क्लोज कर सकते हैं बेटे?
Yes, Anita ji.
Okay.
One and all, we will end the session today. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.